being Beth with myeloma isn't so bad all the time, because I want to help other people and be a part of their, their journey, and just be there to listen to them. I saw several doctors and they would just say, oh, everybody has pain, just do these exercises. Everybody has back pain. So it was one of those things where I wanted to fight for myself and say, hey, you need to listen to me. I am having these issues and no one's listening to me. You're just kind of blowing it off. I know something is going on. We need to keep investigating this until we figure it out. I got a call on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, and it was orthopedic surgeon. And he said, I'm going to hang up this phone in about 2 minutes, and the phone's going to ring, and it's going to be an oncologist, and she's going to tell you what she needs you to do. We knew that, now we're seeing an oncologist. We knew this was cancer now, but we had no idea what this meant. The oncologist gave prognosis of 2 to 3 years at the time. Neurologist that I saw, he said, oh, there's some things that we could do, but you're not going to survive long enough to make it worth it. At that point, we're just feeling like, this is a short-term thing where, I'm going to die from this. We got to figure out what to do with our life, with our kids. How's Mark going to raise these kids by himself? And it was a difficult treatment. It was very hard on the body, and it was really the only treatment at that time. So it was a big deal. But boy, I came out of it great. And I just became Beth, with cancer. And I guess it's okay. I don't mind it too much. If people want to talk about it, I'm always willing to talk about it and share my story and see if I can encourage anyone.
Hi, everyone. It's Stephanie with The Patient Story, and I am always excited for these conversations I'm able to bring to you out there. But today is another one I'm very, very excited about, and I've been talking with Beth for a little bit of time now about her incredible story with multiple myeloma. So I'd like to welcome Beth Ann today. Thank you, Beth, for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Stephanie.
Beth, there are some people whose energy is just so, like, it's palpable, like you can feel it from even over the internet, over Zoom, and you're definitely one of those people. And so I know that, I'm not even a myeloma patient, but I know there's going to be so many people diagnosed with multiple myeloma who are going to be inspired by your story. So I don't want to take up too much time before we get to the story, but I want to give you the chance to introduce yourself for a little bit, because as we know, we are so much more than what we're diagnosed with. So if you want to just talk a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Sure. I live in Casper, Wyoming, and my husband is an engineer, and he works for the highway department. I have 2 children, my daughter, Becca, who lives in Colorado Springs, and she has 2 kids. So I have 2 grandkids, and their names are Isaac and Piper. And so they're really fun. And I'm really excited that I got to see grandchildren in my life. It's so exciting. And then I have a son and daughter-in-law who live in Houghton, Michigan, and they are pregnant. Are going to have a baby in September. So that's really exciting. They're far away, but hopefully we'll get to know that little baby pretty well. And I'm a retired 3rd grade teacher. I worked as a teacher for about 8 years. And then just with health issues and the myeloma, I've just decided that I needed to retire and take some time off and focus on my health. So other than that, we love to travel Wyoming and visit all the incredible places that there are here. And I love to crochet, and I love to read. I'm having trouble with my vision, but when I can, I love to read.
Yeah.
And we love to go see movies and those kind of things. So that's what we do.
Thank you for sharing that. I popped up a photo of Piper because you talked about your granddaughter. Yeah. So, and we'll make sure to share more of those, because that's what life is about, right? All these moments.
Yes, for sure.
So Beth, I know that your story, travels over decades, which isn't unique to you as someone diagnosed with myeloma, but it started in 1996, right? You were feeling your first symptoms. Can you share a little bit more about I mean, it was pain between your shoulder blades and your sternum and your skull for a year. So what finally got you to the doctor?
It was just becoming so consistent. So it had started between my shoulder blades, and then the same kind of pain was happening in my sternum, in my skull. And I was like, this cannot be. It was like a burning pain. It started out like as a pinpoint, and then it would get more, it would radiate farther out, and then into the other bones. And I just thought, this is not right. This is not muscular pain. I saw several doctors in my little town that we were living in, Rock Springs, Wyoming. And I saw several doctors, and they would just say, oh, everybody has pain, just do these exercises. Everybody has back pain. So I finally just was talking to a lot of people and just sharing with them how I was in all this pain. And someone said, there's a orthopedic surgeon in Salt Lake City who will see people without a referral. So we decided to go ahead and go and see him. And he was able to do an MRI on my spine without a referral. So that was really great. And he was the one who found the issues that were happening in there. So do you want me to go further than that?
Yeah, no, that's a great, it's a great place to stop, because I wanted to highlight your experience. You're living in this very small town. There's no oncologist in town. And a lot of people in this country have the situation, right? They don't have maybe even an oncologist, or if they do, not a specialist in town. So how did you approach this? How did you decide where to go? And do you have any guidance for other people on that?
Yeah, I think part of it is you really have to remember that you know your body, and that when other doctors are telling you these things and you just know that it's just not right. My first bachelor's degree is in exercise and sports science. And so I just knew that these exercises that they were giving me were not the right things to do. They were causing more pain. And I just thought, this is not right. I've got to go somewhere where someone will actually take me seriously. And really, I'm one that never goes to the doctor for pain. My doctors now are like, you need to tell us when you are in pain. And I'm always way far along in the process because I wait so long. And so I knew that because of that personality trait, that there was something serious, that I was really feeling like I needed to see a doctor who could help me. And so that was a lot of what we just pushed and researched and looked and asked people. And I think that was an important thing for us to do, because I don't know how long, I would have had a lot more issues, I think, if we hadn't gone then. So
Beth, I really love hearing this message. I don't think you can hear it enough, of patient self-advocacy, of listening to your bodies, because you're the only one who lives in it and with it all the time. Okay, so you advocated for yourself, and you knew this was not normal back pain. These exercises weren't working. You went to a Salt Lake City doctor who finally gave you an MRI and found a plasmacytoma that was compressing your spinal cord where your T3 vertebra used to be.
yes.
Okay, so let's take the medical jargon out of that. How did this translate into real life for you when you heard about what this was that you were dealing with, and then what happened after that?
The doctor, he diagnosed, he told me, he said, we're going to do a biopsy. And they decided to do a biopsy through my sternum because they didn't want to do it through my spine because it was too dangerous. So they did a biopsy through my sternum. And he told me, this was like the week before Thanksgiving in 1997. And he told me, just wait, we'll call you with the results of the biopsy. And of course, when you hear the word biopsy, you think cancer for sure. And that was really difficult. I had two kids. I had a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old at the time, which made it really, really hard to think about a cancer diagnosis. And we lived 3 hours away from Salt Lake City. That's how far Rock Springs is from Salt Lake. And so it just all made it very difficult. So I went home and I sat by the phone and I was cleaning my house. I was getting ready for Thanksgiving. I was doing all the things that you do for that, and just working and feeling pretty normal, except for the pain in those places. And I got a call on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, and it was the orthopedic surgeon, and he said, I'm going to hang up this phone in about 2 minutes, and the phone's going to ring, and it's going to be an oncologist, and she's going to tell you what she needs you to do. And so I put the phone down, and literally when I put the phone down, it rang. And this was back when we had phones that hung up. But anyway, so I picked up the phone, and it was this oncologist, and she said, Beth, you need to get to Salt Lake right now. And I said, do you realize it's 3 hours away? I have 2 small children that I need to figure out what to do with. And she said, I don't care. You need to get here immediately. They're going to hold the admissions office open for you because they're waiting for you. And it's like, okay, well, we'll get there as soon as we can. So we threw stuff in a suitcase. We dropped our kids off. We had lived in Evanston, Wyoming for a while, so that's on the way to Salt Lake. We dropped our kids off there with some friends. And then we drove the longest drive that we ever drove from Salt. It's about an 80-mile drive. And we just sat there and just did not talk. We knew that, now we're seeing an oncologist. We knew this was cancer now, but we had no idea what this meant. And we showed up at the hospital. And of course, as soon as I walked into the admissions office, they're like, are you Mrs. Ayan? Are you Mrs. Ayan? Yes, I'm Mrs. Ayan. Okay, we're going to take you up to the oncology floor. They took us up there. The nurse at the desk said, your room isn't quite ready, so can you just sit in the waiting room for a minute? I said, sure. And then this doctor walked in a few minutes later, and she said, well, to the nurse, she said, well, where's Mrs. Ayan? And the lady said, the nurse said, well, she's right there. And the doctor said, no, that can't be her. And the nurse is like, what do you mean? She's like, because she shouldn't be able to walk. She shouldn't be moving. And she came over to me and she goes, can you walk? I said, oh yeah, I've been cleaning my house. I've been making beds. I've been cooking turkeys. I said, yeah, I'm doing fine. She said, oh my goodness, please don't move an inch. We're going to take you to your room, and I want you to lay in bed, and you're only allowed to get up to use the restroom. And so, at that point, then another oncologist came in, and they told me that they suspected that I had multiple myeloma because they saw myeloma cells in my biopsy, and that I had a plasmacytoma on my teeth, where my T3 vertebrae used to be. It had eaten it completely away, and it had completely compressed my spinal cord, and they were worried that any movement could cause complete paralyzation. Is that the word? Anyway, and they wanted to do 10 days of radiation to get that tumor down so that my spinal cord would come back, and that I wouldn't be in such danger of severing that spinal cord with that plasmacytoma. So anyway, so they were just really surprised, and they couldn't believe it could be multiple myeloma. So it took a while for them to diagnose it because I was only 29. I was a white female, and this is just very not typical of myeloma, especially in 1997. They weren't seeing that very often, and they actually had never seen it at this hospital and several hospitals that I had been at that young. And so they took a while to diagnose it to make sure that they were correct, but they took it to the board at University of Utah, and they all agreed that multiple myeloma was the other thing about it was I didn't show the M protein, which is very indicative then of myeloma. And so I didn't show that. So I was considered non-secretory. So that is a more rare side of the multiple myeloma. And it was more difficult to diagnose because of that.
Ooh.
Crazy story.
I mean, and even though it was such a long time ago, it's like you have all these very vivid moments that you recall, right? It's just like, you don't forget that kind of a situation, and the emotions I'm sure that you were feeling, Beth. So thank you for sharing all of that. You did mention about, the oncology board took 2 weeks to really determine is it multiple myeloma? Because again, you didn't have all the signs that they usually look for. How, I mean, were you spending this time in the hospital, by the way, since you live so far away, and they were just like, you need to stay here while we figure this out? And, how long did you end up being in the hospital? And another question with that is, like you said, you were 29, a kid who's 3, a kid who's 5. There's life that's happening while you're dealing with all this. And so, do you have
Right.
any guidance for people who may be in those shoes right now?
Yeah. So I was in the hospital for about 10 days. They wanted to well, actually, it was only about a week. And they did radiation every single day, trying to get that tumor down until it was safe for me to move around. And my parents they lived in Denver, and they were coming up to visit us for Thanksgiving. And so they just bypassed Rock Springs, picked up our kids in Evanston, and then came to us in Salt Lake City. So they stayed in like an extended day hotel for a little while I stayed in the hospital. And then I had to stay in the hotel. My husband and I ended up staying in the hotel with them for a few days after, because they let me go from the hospital, but I was still doing radiation for a few days. And I had other appointments that they wanted to look at. They wanted to see what the ramifications, of the tumor was going to be on my spine. There's just a quick story about that. That neurologist that I saw, he said, "Oh, there's some things that we could do, but you're not going to survive long enough to make it worth it." So I know, it's just crazy. And so I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess, the oncologist gave us a prognosis of 2 to 3 years at the time. And then this neurologist told us that. And so at that point, we're just feeling like, this is a short-term thing where,
Oh my gosh.
I'm going to die from this. We got to figure out what to do with our life, with our kids. How's Mark going to raise these kids by himself? It was really difficult. And it was difficult for me to have the kids there in some ways while we were in the hospital. I loved having them there for sure. And I felt like we were all, together as part of a family, but I also was dealing with so many emotions, and I didn't want to burden them with my dealings with, I have cancer and it's terminal, and I'm probably not going to live very long with it, and so that was really difficult. But I think my daughter still, struggles with some of that because she was 5, so she remembers some of it. My son doesn't have any recollection of any of that happening, but I can remember them coming in, sitting on my bed, playing with the up and down buttons on the bed, different things like that. But yeah, there was some difficult parts of that. I was glad to have them there because, a mom wants her kids by her side, but at the same time, it was hard on them, and I wish they didn't have to go through it.
I'm first of all, again, thank you for sharing that. And it's so fascinating that, your daughter was 5 at the time, but even so, she still has,
Mhm.
it imprinted something upon her, and she's carried that. I do like to ask, how you were able to sort of deal with this with the family. We're not going to, you know, dive too deeply, I'm sorry, into the first line treatment, because I know it was a while ago. But these are the kinds of things that I think people wonder about, like how do you parent with cancer, and especially you were young, and also how did you break the news to family members? So if you want to talk about that before we move on, that would be great.
Yeah, I remember sitting in the hospital and Mark, my husband, calling a lot of people and telling them what was going on. We had we're churchgoers, and we have a lot of close church family. And so in Evanston and in Rock Springs, we had that. And so there was a lot of people who wanted to support us, and they came and visited, and when we got home, they brought meals and cleaned our house, and they did so many things for us, which was just, amazing. They took care of our kids. They would take them on, trips. If they were going to the store, they'd come and pick them up, or they were going to McDonald's, they'd come and get them or whatever. So that was really helpful. And I think the way that we kind of just dealt with it with the kids was just that mommy is sick and that she's going to have to do some medication. And I mean, they were too young to really understand. I mean, we used the word cancer, but they didn't understand what that meant and, the ramifications of that until later on in their life. And they just basically have lived with it their whole lives, pretty much. But yeah, so, and I can remember like when I lost my hair the first time, my daughter did not want to see me with a bald head. And so I always wore a hat or a scarf or something. I didn't wear wigs too much, a little bit. I just didn't have access to good wigs at that time, and where we lived and stuff, and the cost of them. Anyway, they have such better resources now. But anyway, my son loved it. He would take my hat off. He would rub my head. He just thought it was so cool that I was bald. And so that was a difficult thing to kind of manage because I didn't want to upset my daughter, but at the same time, I couldn't stop my 3-year-old from that. But yeah, we just kind of lived that life. I was homeschooling my daughter in kindergarten at the time, which is crazy. So I was doing treatment. I was doing the first line of treatment, like you were talking about, the VAD, which was vincristine, adriamycin, and dexamethasone. And they would hook me up in Salt Lake with a pump with this fluorescent pink medication in it that had biohazard written all over it, and I'm thinking they're pumping this right into my veins. But yeah, so they would hook me up in Salt Lake. I would go home for 4 days, and then a home healthcare nurse would come into the house and take care of it. So my kids were around this all the time, and I had very difficult veins. So the poor nurses would just struggle, and my kids would be walking around while they're doing, all of this. And sometimes I think maybe I would try to expose them less of that if I had to do it over again. But I didn't know what I was doing. This was all new to us. I was just trying to survive the day, and do what they told me to do. And it was a difficult treatment. It was very hard on the body, and it was really the only treatment at that time. And that was widespread anyway. And luckily my husband worked really close to the house. And had a very flexible job. So if he needed to come home while I was feeling sick or whatever, he was able to do that and take care of the kids. But one thing, I guess, is that it developed a really close relationship between their dad and them, because he was their caregiver in a lot of situations where normally I would have been. We had my mom would come for about a week, like during that time when I was doing the VAD treatment. And then the next month, my mother-in-law would come, and they would just switch back and forth and help with the kids. So I think the thing that I would tell other people is to accept help, let people help you, and ask for help if you need to. I know it's so hard. I want to do everything on my own and just do it. But sometimes you need help, and it's okay to ask.